So I'm Bill Lange. I've given talks here before, and my co-presenter is George. You want to introduce yourself, George?
Yeah, sure. So my name is George Portugal, and I'm the Chief Preservationist of the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, which is an annual video game expo held in Garden City, New York.
And if you guys never been to that expo, it's held at the Cradle of Aviation Museum in Garden City. And it's where Charles Lindbergh took off to fly to Paris, and it's an amazing museum of aircraft and fire trucks and arcade machines. They all go together.
That's right.
All right, so we're here today. We're just going to kind of tell a story about this particular Pong machine. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so in 1958 out on Long Island, this scientist, he created a table tennis game on an oscilloscope. And everybody's probably heard this story before. It's just, it was like an annual event, kind of like a picnic or just an event to show off what they were doing at this lab. And so the kids would come in and they would play this ping pong game on an oscilloscope. And I think it was there for like 3 days, and then it got repurposed and kind of disappeared for a while. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, that's about right. And yeah, to my knowledge, one of the earliest games, one of the earliest video game kind of things.
So this will come up later because this kind of shows prior art when it comes to future lawsuits. So later in 1966, Ralph Baer, he came up with the idea. He actually came up with the idea in the 50s, but then he kind of got back to it. And this was also out on Long Island, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So he built this brown box, and so he's kind of considered the father of the home console because he created the brown box that would hook up to your television set. It had cartridges, but they weren't really cartridges like you would see on the Atari 2600. They were actually like jumper boards that you would plug in there, and the circuits inside the console would change. See, anything else?
No, I think that about covers the Odyssey, yeah.
And so then a few years later, so he created this with his team. He got some money from the company he was working for, and in a few years they created the Odyssey, and they sold the license to Magnavox. So Magnavox in 71 came out with or in 72 came out with the Magnavox Odyssey. Again, this was a cartridge-based system. Cartridge number one or game number one was table tennis. So it was a Pong-type game. It had the balls going back and forth. No sound, no color. It was just the Pong game going back and forth. 2 players could play using the paddle controllers.
That's right. I mean, I'd say the only major differences between this and what we're more comfortable with Pong is that you could move your paddles more or less in any direction. There's no score keeping too, so there's like a couple things about it that's quite different if you're accustomed to standard Pong. Yeah.
But remember, this was a console that actually played on your TV. It wasn't an arcade machine.
Right.
Around the same time, Nolan Bushnell and others were working at Ampex.
Yeah.
And so they created this organization called Synergy to create computer space based on prior art. The PDP, what was it? PDP?
That was the PDP-1.
Yeah, Space War and PDP-1 that they had seen in their college days. So this particular computer space here, well, I'll let you talk about this one.
Yeah, so this game is also located at the Cradle of Aviation Museum, and it's been running for about 2 years, so you can actually go there and play it right now. It's running almost 7 days a week. Yeah. And
so this will come up again because this particular game is why this particular game is sitting here today. So in 1972, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, they left.
They were at Nutting. Yeah, so they started at Ampex, and then they quit that job and then went to Nutting Associates to make computer space, and then as soon as they got enough seed money, they started Atari.
They started Synergy, but then they found out the name was taken, and so they renamed it to Atari. Ralph?
Ampex, the tape recorder company?
Yeah. They made amplifiers, like audio amplifiers and sound, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So that's where they first met, where Ted Dabney and Bushnell met. then, yeah, they left for nutting and then Atari.
So they co-founded Atari, and then the first game that they developed at Atari was Pong, also based on prior art, because Nolan Bushnell had seen the Magnavox and table tennis on the Magnavox, and he hired Alcorn to design an arcade version of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think that Bushnell had seen it as a tech demo that the Magnavox people were doing before the product was released, and so yeah, I think this was initially a training exercise for Alcorn. So it was like, you know, he showed him Computer Space, he showed him the schematics, and then he said, well, I'd like to make a table tennis kind of game, but I think he left it to Alcorn to you know.
It was like an experiment to see how well Alcorn could make a game, but it turned out so good.
That's right.
They decided to sell it. And so the difference between Pong and table tennis on the Magnavox is on Pong you have score, you have sound, and also the paddles, when you move the paddles, depending on where the ball hits the paddle, the ball will go off in a different angle.
Yeah, the angle is totally determined on where it hits the paddle. The other really critical difference is that the more times you successfully hit the ball back and forth, the speed increases. I mean, eventually you get to a fixed speed where it's just not going to go any faster, but that really changes the nature of the game and makes it a lot more fun. Yeah.
Okay, so this was probably 1972, 1973 where Pong came out.
Right.
And it uses very similar electronics to Computer Space, and that's going to come up again as well.
Right.
So as soon as Atari came out with Pong, Magnavox sued everybody, right? They're like, this is our IP, we're going to sue. So Magnavox sued Atari for Pong, and David Ahl, who's actually he'll be speaking here tomorrow, I think.
Yep.
He's the founder of Creative Computing Magazine and the basic programming, 101 basic programming that many of us learned how to program out of. He testified in the trial on behalf of Atari, and at the time Atari had just started. They didn't have a lot of cash, and Nolan offered to pay him in a Pong arcade cabinet. And so we both got this story from David separately. So
right.
This is a story he told us that Nolan's like, you know, I don't have any cash. I can send you this Pong machine. David accepted, and Atari took this Pong machine off the line, and it was built in like, would you say fall of '73?
No, I think it was spring of '73. Yeah.
It's based on the components on the board in there. We could tell when it was made.
Yeah.
So they sent this to David. I don't know if he was living here in New Jersey at the time or Connecticut. Yeah. So he received that, and then at some point in the late '70s, David moved to a smaller housing. I think it's an apartment or something,
Yeah.
and he didn't have room for a full-size arcade machine. So he actually took the board and the control panel, he put the board inside the control panel, kept the TV, and got rid of everything else. So it just became like a tabletop console with the TV and the control panel. And at some point it broke, it stopped working, and basically it kind of disappeared from history in David's garage or just on a shelf somewhere.
Right.
So fast forward about 30 years, my friend Rob was telling me that David was selling off his collection. And basically I made a negotiation with David to buy, what I was really interested in was not so much the Pong machine, but he had all this paper documentation and photographs that were used in producing Creative Computing Magazine, and I wanted all that material just to read through it and document it and scan it. And so that's what I was interested in. And so we negotiated a deal, and I was able to make a donation to his charity. I got my company to match it, so he actually got twice what he wanted for it. And he's like, oh, I got this Pong machine, you want that? And I'm like, hell yeah, who wouldn't want that? So when I got the Pong machine, it looked like what you see here. It was just the control panel with the motherboard inside. It was not working, and it had about 400 plays on the meter on the inside. So I messed around with it for a while. I think I had it for like the summer. And then, I don't know if there's another slide. So I had it for that summer, and I write for this gaming magazine, and I went to the Long Island Retro show, and I had a table there for the magazine, and we were signing people up, and I saw the computer space there, and I talked to the guy who runs the show, Joel, and he introduced me to George, who had just fixed the computer space, and as I mentioned earlier, they had very similar electronics. So I met George there.
Right.
I think he came over to my house, and I gave him the Pong machine.
And
thing. And
this was a shock for me, like, because when we spoke, I assumed Pong was a full-size arcade cabinet. So it was about 2 weeks after the show in 2019, and then I come over to your house, and I'm expecting that. And then I see, this. And so I was like, okay, so this is different, but that's all right. And so yeah, what I ended up doing was I opened it up, and can I switch to the pictures, actually? Because I have some... Yeah, let me switch to those pictures real quick. All right, so yeah, when you take it apart, when I took it apart, this is what I saw. So there's the Pong board just sitting there, and David had wired it up so that you could plug it into the original monitor. The original monitor was lost. We don't know what happened to that. And it was basically kind of consoleized.
And it just used a regular TV that's been modified, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So Bushnell and Dabney, for the early iterations of their games, there were no such things as arcade monitors. And so what they were doing was they were taking consumer television sets. Computer Space has a vacuum tube TV. Pong had a solid-state transistor-based TV. And so they would basically hack it up and feed it a composite video signal and just cut out the RF circuitry. And so that's the original way that they did that. And I figured that out when I was fixing Computer Space. And so thankfully with this game, I found that it was actually a very simple problem. Like the board set was fine. It needed, I replaced the capacitors mainly just as a preventive maintenance thing. They, just because they're, more than 40 years old at this point. What I found the problem is that once I figured out how to connect it up to a TV, it just had one chip that was defective. So it was the chip that detected whether a coin was being pressed. So when I first hooked it up to a television, I would get into the attract mode. I would try to coin up, and I would get nothing. And then I, took out a logic probe and started tracing things back. And thankfully, the schematics for Pong are easy to read, very much unlike Computer Spaces, which are like indecipherable. And so I found that it was one chip that just, was stuck low, and it wasn't detecting a coin being pressed. And so thankfully with Pong, just like all of these early Bronze Age games, there aren't any proprietary chips on them. They're all these 7400 discrete logic chips. And so you can find modern equivalents pretty easily. So it was just like
it's all off-the-shelf parts.
All off-the-shelf parts. So it was like a, $2 chip from DigiKey, and I desoldered the original, popped this one in, and I was expecting more problems, but thankfully that was it. And so I got the game working. And so I guess from here we can go back to the
Yeah, that's good enough. So I think that's the last slide in there.
Oh, is it? Okay, cool.
So again, we met at Long Island Retro in I think August of 19, yeah?
Yeah, 2019.
And
yes.
he came over, I gave him this, and within a few days, I guess, you had it working.
Yeah, I jumped on it. I didn't want to.
And then in September, a month later, we had a get-together at my house called Atari Party, where all the Atari people from all over the world come over, and we just, all 6 of us, and we all, everybody comes over and brings the stuff they're working on, and we just play games and chit-chat. And it's actually a lot of fun. And George brought the working Pong machine. We set it up with a Commodore monitor, right? This is a Commodore monitor.
Yeah.
And David came over, so I wasn't expecting to see him, but he came over and he got to play this game that had been his he hadn't seen it working in like 30 years. So you can see a picture of David All playing the game.
Yeah, this was his first time playing it, yeah.
And so at the close of the day, George took it home with him. And I had not seen the Pong machine or George in 2 years because of COVID, right? So we hadn't gotten together. So I had not seen this until last, like I saw photos, but I hadn't actually seen the game until last night.
That's right. But yeah, so, once I fixed it, I didn't want to just fix it. I wanted to like fully restore it. And so I started doing some research, and thankfully, because of what this game is, there's lots of details on the dimensions of Pong, and so people who own cabinets have put the information out on Atari Age and all the specifications of, you know, what all the pieces, the size and shape of all the pieces are, and so at the Cradle of Aviation Museum, we have a hangar bay with a working wood shop and, you know, some stuff for building cabinets, and so we thought, like, why not, you know, make a full-size cabinet and bring this thing back to the way it used to be. So I started at the museum, and so that's what this image here is, and so, you know, we got some press board that matches the original, because even that is documented, and started just doing the initial work. But then for a variety of reasons, well, one of which just being that, like, the airplane hangar doesn't have any heat, so it was winter. It was not going to be fun to be, you know, doing this in the cold. So I had a plan B instead of just working there. So I took all of the materials and I brought them back home, and I started working on this with my father. So my father is a, you know, woodworker and cabinet maker, and he's retired, and he doesn't know a thing about video games, but he certainly knows about how to build a cabinet. And so at this point, like, I went from being in charge to basically, you know, doing what he told me, because he was like, I was like, okay, this is what I need. Here are the dimensions, and you know, he kind of led the charge from there, and we went to work. And so we started, you know, cutting pieces. Like you can see here, this is the bezel before we had it painted and anything like that. So I kind of just let him take care of that, put all these pieces together. And then from there, you know, we had to find a good laminate. And this was really tough because, again, I didn't have a real working cabinet to compare with. And so I kind of just did my best using, you know, thankfully there's lots of photographs showing Pong. And so, you know, I did my best trying to find a matching laminate. And so we went ahead and laminated all that wood. And then when it came time to do the, bezel. I'm sorry, yeah, the bezel for the cabinet. I went to an auto, you know, like a body work guy for cars, and he's a friend of my family, and so I brought him the control panel and said, you know, can you match this? Can you get me the correct paint? And so he ended up doing that for me, and then also he put on a coat of epoxy on there, because, like, with the wood, it gets pitted, so if he just simply painted it, it would have not looked correct. And so he did an epoxy coat, and then he did a matching paint. And I mean, as you guys can see, there's really no way of knowing which piece is original and which piece is not. So that was tricky, but then, you know, the final pieces was just getting it all assembled together. So I'll show you some of those pictures of it starting to take shape. So, like, yeah, you can see here, you know, things are getting glued down and put together, and it's getting closer.
Did you put a coat of paint on the sides before you put the laminate on?
No.
It's right on the wood?
It's directly on the wood, yeah. So yeah, I had this really foul-smelling and very powerful glue for the laminate that I also got, and yeah, we just put that on and used paint rollers just to, you know, prevent any air bubbles from happening. So it's actually kind of a delicate process, like, and again, that was all my dad, because I you know, that's not my not my thing. But thankfully, he's done that many times before, so he knew what to do. I think, let me see if I can get a picture of. Yeah, so this is right about when we were done. We just had to put on the T-molding at this point. You can see it's put together. For the television, I lucked out because the Cradle of Aviation Museum has well over 150 CRTs for the expo, and I wanted to get something that matched in size, and I was even lucky enough to match it in model. So the original 1972 TV was a Hitachi television, and back in '72, Japanese TVs were actually not that common yet in the United States, so finding one of those is really hard. So I got a, you know, modern, or, you know, 90s era Hitachi that's the same size, and rigged it up so that it, you know, powers on when the arcade cabinet powers on and just goes straight to the game. And so yeah, so let me see if I can show you some pictures of the back too. Here's my son working on it as well. Yeah, so the set just kind of sits right back here. You can see that, and so, you know, we just made like a shroud, which again matches how the original shroud is. You can see, like, on the bottom left over there, there's like a little adapter there, and so that it's just feeding the composite video directly into the set and going straight to the Pong board. And the Pong board's just sitting right there on the left-hand side, so that's what was pulled directly out of the original cabinet. And actually, if you're looking at an original cabinet, that's how it's mounted on the wall on the left-hand side.
Is the audio, is it coming through the TV speaker?
It is,
Yep.
and that's how the original one would work as well. Yeah. Yeah, and then finally we have like, just a makeshift kind of tray in case people, because this was going to be at the museum, and I figured people are bound to be throwing quarters in there, and of course they did.
Yeah, so this has been at the Cradle of Aviation Museum for the last year and a half or so.
Exactly, yeah.
And so when I gave it to George, it had 480 plays on it. And how many does it have now?
About 5,500 plays.
So it's been played a lot in the museum over the last year and a half.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so having this right alongside Computer Space was great because we had like a really nice retrospective of arcade history, starting with the very first arcade cabinet, Computer Space, going all the way into the modern era, and we have like about 80 cabinets there. So this was like front and center with that exhibit.
5,500 quarters?
It's surprising that there was 3 in there.
Yeah.
Because all you have to do is hit the button and it'll start playing.
Yeah, I rigged it so that you press the coin return button, and that's how you coin up the game. But people, I guess, thought it was, put a few quarters in.
So if you do put a quarter in, does the game start automatically?
No.
You still got to push the button?
So it's either you can put it into a coin op mode where you just take the wires that I've put in here and plug it into the coin mech, so you can make it coin operated, but it's either or.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right. So that's kind of the...
So the original cabinet did not have a back door on it.
Yeah, that's right.
This one has been upgraded to have a back door so we can access the inside. And did the original cabinet have wheels?
It did not. So that was another thing that I just did for the practicality of moving it around, especially for bringing it from New York to New Jersey here. The wheels can get removed though, so to get it to its, if you want to have it to its right height and all that, you could certainly do that. But again, I made a few compromises just to make things convenient and practical. But otherwise, I tried to make it as original as possible.
So David All is going to be here tomorrow. I don't think he's here now, but we're looking forward to seeing him actually play this machine that he had in his house for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah, that's
right. Should be interesting.
Yeah.
And so the story of this is Nolan Bushnell gave this to David All, and I got it from David All. So it's only had 3 owners.
That's right.
It's never been in an arcade until it was into the museum. It's fully playable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that we have a piece of history like this that
It's one more thing that would have been gone from history, and we were able to acquire it and restore it.
Yeah.
To museum quality.
Yeah, and have it for people to interact with and enjoy too. Yeah.
And it's if anybody wants to play, you can just go up there and push the coin button. I think we need to do some repair on one of the pots. It's loose. Yeah, the right potentiometer is a little loose, so I will be working on that. But otherwise, and so we'll have it over in the show floor on over the weekend. Move it up, we'll fix it and put it over there.
Yep.
So, any questions?
Thank you.
Do you remember precisely what chip failed on there? I know you said it was part of the coin select thing.
Yeah, I want to say it was like a 7402, or if I go back through the pictures, I can figure out exactly what it was. But yeah, it was just a discrete. I think it was an AND gate, just a simple maybe quad AND gate, and yeah, it wasn't totally failed. It was just the one I needed for it to detect a coin was just stuck low, so I would push the coin, that pulls it high, and then that just starts everything else. And so I was expecting more, but then I was like, wait, that's it? I was just like, and I told him, and he's like, wait, you're done? It was great. Yeah.
So I have read that, Nolan Bushnell and Ted designed Computer Space. And when Alcorn saw that, he's like, yeah, I'm not following that.
Yes.
I can't follow that design. And he redesigned the way this worked, but used similar technology.
That's right.
So you worked on both. How close are the boards, the way the boards are set up?
They're quite different. There's so many improvements with this over Computer Space is a lot simpler to understand. The number of ICs, the chips, is maybe a third of Computer Space. Computer Space is like a 3-board stack, and you've got maybe 200 different chips. And like I said, the schematics are indecipherable. Thank goodness, like someone more recently created modern, legible schematics of the game. So if you're trying to fix one now, it's better. But until that's fairly recent. Whereas this is easy to understand. The video circuitry on this is better. So I think I was speaking with Tom earlier about that with Computer Space, you can take composite video off of that board and you can feed it to a television as well. But the sync is not standard. So you need a very specific monitor to get an image. Like the only monitor I found that I could use with Computer Space was a PVM, because of course like PVMs are professional and they can be used with a broad range of signals. Otherwise, you just can't get it to sync up with this. I mean, you could put this on a flat screen TV and it'll work. So it has like a fairly modern sync signal. So yeah, but again, there's similarities. Like the way that it generates video is similar. It's just way more streamlined and way more efficient.
And the whole thing is just built with a clock and TTL logic?
That's correct.
There's no CPU?
There is no CPU.
No CPU.
Is any sort of memory or just?
No. It's all discrete logic.
Just all discrete logic and...
Yeah, that's right. It's from a time when, I mean, yeah, the concept of using a CPU was just too prohibitive. It was, in fact, they looked at that when they were making Computer Space, and they realized it would cost them maybe $15,000, $20,000 to make a single cabinet, and they were like, this is never going to work. But then they came up with this more elegant, simple solution to get a game on a consumer television with just discrete logic, and it became feasible. Yeah.
So this was like the second arcade machine, whereas Computer Space was the first one, but it's a complicated game to play. I mean, there's gravity and the control panel's kind of tough to use. So I don't think that one sold very well.
No, maybe 1,000.
This one sold a lot, because it's simple, right? You can put it anywhere. Anybody knows how to play ping pong or tennis. And it's sold tens of thousands of units and was copied by tons of companies.
That's right. Yeah. You had, some that were licensed, like I think Bally and Midway did licensed clones of Pong, but then you had like Chicago Coin. You had like so many, basically every pinball. What's that?
Allied Leisure.
Yeah. So pretty much everybody did. Yeah.
Do you have the information about the lawsuit? That you mentioned earlier?
About the original lawsuit. So like what specifically?
So I actually have, in the documentation that I got from David, is actually the transcripts of the whole legal suit, like just tons of paper.
Yeah. It was a multi-company lawsuit.
Multi-company. So Atari probably didn't have to pay Magnavox off, but they did, because they just wanted to get back to making games, and I think they paid Magnavox. Atari was the only company that did this. Right. They paid them a few $1 million to acquire the IP, and then they went off and made their stuff, where the other companies...
They fought it longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bally, Midway, Chicago Coin, Allied Leisure, all of those companies were bundled into this lawsuit, and I think it continued for them for some time.
Atari was in a very precarious position because they were in the midst of designing the VCS at that moment, and they did not want Magnavox to have a piece of that.
No.
Yeah.
No, they didn't.
They were trying to keep that as quiet as possible. So they just paid them off and leave us alone.
That's right. I think, did I see someone else's hands up? No, maybe.
I was wondering, so in pre-CPU, it's blowing my mind, it's all discrete logic. Is there a concept of pixel? Is the state of the screen represented in the logic chips, or is it sort of emergent?
You're essentially, it's all counters.
It's just all, it's all counters. It's all counters.
You're figuring out when, okay, am I at this point on the screen? Okay, then I take and send a voltage for white pixel. Am I not? Am I sending a voltage for a black pixel? You've got counters for determining your horizontal sync, your vertical sync, and from that you can take and time everything else out.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of that with the analog component of that, I know that's Ted Dabney's work. The discrete logic end of it, the digital end of it is more Bush now. Well, if we're talking about Computer Space, but the same applies here too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the schematics for Computer Space are a wonderful cluster.
Yeah, it's really, yeah. I was very lucky with Computer Space because the actual game, I didn't have to fix the game. The game was working. It just needed capacitors, and that was it. And it was actually the monitor that I had to fix to get that game running.
One of the things that really catches my eye with Computer Space on the board, they use diode memories for the ships, for the shapes of the ships.
That's right.
They're actually drawn. They actually taped it out on the board so that you see the diodes in the shapes of the ship.
Yeah, that's right. On the memory board, which is, I think
It's taped, or how does it show up on the board?
it's on the left-hand side of the first board that you see. So there's the SyncStar board, the memory board, and the third one I'm blanking on the name of, but it's the outermost one, so it's the one that you see. And like Tom is saying, like, it didn't have to be done this way, but the diodes are each lit pixel of a sprite. And so instead of just like organizing them however, Bushnell set it up on the silk screen so that you see the rocket. So you have three versions of the rocket, and then you have the flying saucer. And there's three versions of the rocket because they use some, I think, some flip-flops and inverters to take the sprite and then flip it so that you get the illusion of rotation. Sure. And it's beautiful. It's a really cool thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Computer Space has that fiberglass cabinet. That had to be expensive to build compared to some just throwing wood together.
I know the story with that too is that Nolan had a friend that used to make pools, like hot tubs, and of course he did.
Yeah.
And so he wanted it to stand out, and so he did the design for it in modeling clay, and then contracted out the work to this friend. And so you've got, I think, 4 variants. You've got the yellows, which are really hard to find, the blues and the reds, which are more common. And then after Bushnell and Dabney left Nutting Associates, they made a 2-player version, which is slightly wider and it's green. And those are the last ones. Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, if this is the first time you have a TV and a video cabinet to play a game, where would you put these? There's no arcades, right? Or
There were arcades. Yeah,
There were arcades.
So there were like pinball arcades and like kind of Great Adventure where you would have like skee ball and they would put them in there.
It was all electromechanical and it was pinball and that was what consisted of the arcade.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually part of Nolan's childhood too. He worked at a place like that in Utah when he was a kid, and I think that's where he first got this in him. But yeah, I think the first test market of this was a place called Andy Capp's.
Andy Capp's, a bar.
It was a bar in California, and and unlike Computer Space, this thing like overflowed with quarters, and they realized they had something special.
So we're gonna we'll fix this some point today. I mean, you can come up and try it. We'll put it on the show floor. By the IBM display over the weekend. And then after that, we're going to put it in the museum here, so it'll be on display in the museum.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Thank you.